after principal photography was finished with this movie, there was a party in Malibu with John Boorman and most of the actors and the cast of the crew of Point Blank. It was in a bar in Malibu, and of course Lee Marvin overserved himself, and John Boorman's like, "You're not going to drive, I'm taking your keys." And after a physical struggle of making sure Lee Marvin didn't drive home, John Boorman drove his car with Lee Marvin on top of his own car, surfing it as the cops pulled it over. You can look up more information about this.
It might be both the most Lee Marvin thing ever and the most John Boorman thing ever.
And it's the most California thing ever.
That's true, too. Yeah, definitely.
All right. Today we're going to talk about a neo-noir from the late 60s, and one of my personal favorites. And it's interesting to hear what Kyle has to say about this one.
Yeah, my first time watching 1967's Point Blank. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoetheFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and once again, thank you for watching and liking, subscribing. If you're new here, simply it's a critique of a film, make you probably interested in watching it yourself. Today, we're going to cover from 1967 when the Noirs came back. It's part of the new neo-noir, but it's also kind of a mixture of noir and French new wave. It's Point Blank with Lee Marvin.
So when the mysterious criminal Walker is double-crossed and left for dead by a supposed friend, he retraces his steps to find his old partner in the criminal organization that has his money. As Walker's vendetta moves through Los Angeles, the bodies begin piling up and the enemies start to appear on all sides.
So one of the things about this movie is not only does Lee Marvin come back with revenge on people that did him wrong, but he also murders a lot of inanimate objects. He murders a bed, he murders a phone, he murders a car. There's a lot of murdering that's happening after Lee Marvin gets revenge. His name is Walker. We don't really find out if his name is Walker is his first name or last name. It's one of those anonymous things about this movie.
Yes, he's the Beyonce of 1967. That's okay. Now, we talked about this previously because I've not seen many John Boorman films, and for the most part, what I have seen is kind of like, I've seen a lot of like the more popular ones, but his more popular films tend to actually be ones that I find people don't like as much, which is weird. Like Exorcist II, The Heretic, which I adore. Zardoz, which I can't watch again. I can't do it. And then Deliverance was the other one I'd seen. I really enjoyed Deliverance.
And all those movies came all those movies came after Point Blank.
Yeah, so we see this kind of like not a first-time director, but a like fairly new director. And actually, it's because of Lee Marvin's insistence that he got final cut on this film. Lee Marvin was at a stage in his career where he was able to get final cut on movies that he was featured in, and he chose to get all that ability and then move it over to John Boorman, which is an incredible vote of confidence for a young director.
One of the interesting components is definitely mixture of noir mixing with French New Wave, and this is why I like it. There's a lot of dreamy qualities to the film, where almost you feel like you're almost at sleep. There's a lot of things that overlay. So there's a great scene of Walker, of course, walking down the LAX, that very famous walkway down LAX. But the sound effects resonates to what we cut back to his wife, and she almost wakes up. It's almost like a haunting, almost like a ticking clock of he's coming, getting ready. But it's overlaid by just the footstep sounds.
Yeah, I would liken his as maybe like a 50 years prior take on John Wick, if you will. Like that's how Walker felt to me, was that he was kind of like a precursor to that kind of a character, the unstoppable hero, if you will. Because no one in this film is a good person, but we are meant to believe that Walker is the right person.
Yes.
And I find that his abilities, are very Taken-esque. I've got a specific set of skills. I'm going to come get you if you don't give me my $93,000, which today would be about $760,000. So I would say
it's not really that much.
It's not a lot,
it's
but
much,
but more if you don't have anything.
Right. So it's like it's much, but it's not really that much to cause such havoc.
Yeah.
Right. Definitely the cuts and overlays, which I like about this, is the dreamy qualities of like when he comes in encounters with back to his wife, but you have this overlay cutting texture of time lapse. All of a sudden the apartment's empty, all of a sudden she's dead, all of a sudden the color mixtures, and then you go back to the fights, his brutality fights, with colors and contextures, and then you get it again when he makes Carol Connor's character, and then he whacks the guy, and then Carol Connor flashback of, oh yeah, this is the guy, without even turning around and seeing. So editing is really crafted really well with this.
Yeah, I was enamored with it at the beginning because I felt like it was setting itself up almost like a jigsaw puzzle. The beginning sequence where we're getting all of our information, it's thrown at us so out of sequence
It is,
that when it was done, I kind of hated it, but then it kept all those details in my head in a way that made me kept recurring to them every time we jumped back to them. Like, I didn't get lost in it, but I was just like so frustrated with what is going on, and trying to just like get all the pieces and put them together. But then as these pieces got referenced later in this dreamlike narrative, they felt more in place. Yeah. It was almost like a crash course on like, let's confuse you, but then make you realize you know everything going on.
Yes, so it's a little starting point. This movie would say something like Mulholland Drive, which is a series of vignettes. This is almost like a jigsaw puzzle, but then all the pieces are not. It's not put together. It's almost like, now we're going to go to this piece. Now we go to this piece. It's not really assembled right. But the story is kind of, even though it's a little bit convoluted, it's a little more clear what's happening. It's simply a revenge story, but it's cut up.
Yeah, there's elements that are lost to it that you don't necessarily need, and I think that's where it saves itself, is that you're not losing important information. Sometimes these fractured narrative pieces can lose important information, and they kind of hold it over your head, even though the main character knows it and everybody else does, and you're just meant to not understand or not get it. That's not the way it works for me. So having all the important information still relayed is what works here. And I think too, did we ever find out that whole part with him on the ground during the fight and John Vernon is on him asking for help? Like, that part they kept flashing to in the opening, I was like, is this a fight in prison? I didn't really know what was going on there, but I got the info.
It's almost like a reference of the movie Playtime, where everybody has the same outfits, the look, and everything. In that party room, everybody has the same outfits and looks, but the only people that stand out are the people that are not. They're overly exaggerating. They're falling and collapsing the floor, which is Maul and Walker. Right?
I was thinking it might have, like, I was remembering Naked Gun 33 1/3, where they start the food fight in the prison eatery, and then they get underneath the table and plan their escape. That's what I was thinking was going on. It was almost like they were in a place where they started a big brawl, and then they got down and actually discussed the details, but maybe I'm completely wrong.
But it's an over-exaggeration of desperation, right? He almost tackles them on the ground and like, please listen to me.
Yeah.
So, right, yeah.
It was like the creepiest introduction to John Vernon.
Yes, it's John Vernon's first movie.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
in an introduction to John Vernon.
Right, which is far more animated than he is in later on in his career.
Yep.
But he does get a wonderful death.
Yeah.
I don't want to be, he dies.
I felt myself wanting to pause just to see how much they were willing to show.
It's shot clever for 1967.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, definitely when you talk about the animatedness of John Vernon, it's more in line with like Killer Clowns from Outer Space John Vernon than it is with like Dirty Harry Animal House, even heavy metal John Vernon.
A little more grounded.
Yeah, this is kind of more towards like the over-the-topness. And I think it's almost important that he does this, because I read that there were some like frustrations between him and Lee Marvin on the film, because Vernon found himself to be an actor first,
and Lee Marvin
found himself to be a fighter first.
Yeah.
His action scenes were very much, I'm going to actually punch you. And Vernon was like doubled over in pain at one point, saying that's not how this works. And so it kind of created this little bit of animosity between them that you can see on film. And if he didn't match Marvin's animated fighting with his animated acting, I don't know if it would have worked as well. So I do think it was very clever for him to do so.
Contrast, I love it. And of course, if referencing clowns, if you're very careful and you watch this very keenly, you will see Sid Haig in this movie.
Mm-hmm. And the funny thing about it is, because he's an actor we recently lost, and this was, I think, one of his first, if not his first roles, had to be.
Yeah.
Because he's not even credited with like a specific character name. But he's one of those guys where you recognize him more as an old man. So when you do see him as a young man, it takes you back.
Yeah.
It catches you off guard. You're like, even though you told me he was in the movie, I saw him and I was like, that's a guy I know. And like,
so it's a little Easter egg.
If
you watch this movie closely, you're like, oh my God, there he is. And then that's him? What? Yes. Yep. The female femme fatale, the Trojan horse in this movie is Angie Dickinson. Who's, I don't know, it's almost like a warning. She wears this costume that's almost like a yellow stripe. It's almost like, warning, don't.
Oh yeah, I thought of like a bee. She's got a stinger. Watch out.
Yes, yes. So the costuming for her fits perfect, like yellow and danger. She'll do you harm.
Mm-hmm. And people tend to be in the highest amount of danger whenever that costume is removed. And it does happen a few times.
Of course, and Lee Marvin and her have this fumbling on the floor scene too. That kind of matches. I think it's supposed to bookend Maul and Walker on the ground, And then her and Walker on the ground too.
Yeah, like a metamorphosis almost of her character moving from the,
right.
the guy we don't want to the guy we do want to.
It's the fun part of the movie of just they're at that nice house in Malibu.
Yep.
I've actually researched a lot. The house is not the same anymore. There's a lot of renovations to it, but it's almost like $1 billion. If you got $2 million, you can buy the property.
Yeah.
But her of just walk around and aggravating him.
Yeah.
With all the gadgets of '67.
I had found somewhere that Drew Barrymore owns one of the houses in this film. That's featured heavily in the movie, and that she's kept it mostly similar to what it was. I wasn't able to figure out which house it was, so I wasn't sure if it was that one or not. But yeah, it's a nice set piece because really it's the only time our characters actually breathe. The entire movie is at that house when they're supposed to be waiting for
the decompression. Right. Yeah. Another feature is, of course, we talked about mentioned Carol O'Connor before Archie Bunker comes in, and he's I don't know, it's not Archie. It's not that everyday comedic, but it's that staunch. He's starchy.
Yep. It's weird because it's not. Yeah, you're right. It's not Archie, but it has the same level of animated frustration, if you will. Like when he gets cornered by Marvin's character and he's trying to figure out a way out of it. He gets mad and just says, like, is this worth it for this little bit amount of money? Like, what is wrong with you?
And then he murders the phone.
You're some sort of psycho, he says. And it's like, yeah he kind of is, you know?
Yeah. But yeah, he doesn't, but it's like that starchiness still that we like of Carol Carter. And of course in the TV show, The Hidden Night, he does it marvelously. So, yeah, and the dream sequences, I think just before this film started, Alcatraz closed, so they're able to shoot some of the movie in Alcatraz, the beginning and the ending of it too.
And it was also before they were doing tours, so that they were able to do that without much problem. Basically, when the tours started up, it became more and more difficult to go to Alcatraz to shoot because that was where the money was getting people in to do tours at this fabled prison.
And of course, it's very shot in the L.A. water duct before Grease and Terminator 2. You shot it into the you do a scene in the L.A. water duct.
Yeah, it's never a safe place to be. My mind was harkening back to it seemed one of the finales of 24, where it was like all set here and there was like a helicopter attack going on in this one area. I was like, why do people keep going here? Yeah. It's never a good idea.
One of the theories, a lot of fan theories is out there, is actually this is all just in Walker's mind as he slowly dies actually in the event, and this is just that's why it's very dreamlike, translucent. There's a lot of plot holes, a lot of sequences that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and a lot of theories that people subscribe to. I don't really buy into that. I understand that because it's how it's projected.
Yeah, and Borman took that, or he heard that and actually said, that's interesting. It could make sense. Like, he acknowledged the fact that, okay, but he never flat out said, sure. And I refuse to believe most of those, like, it was all a dream ideas, or it was all like a fever dream. I don't find that theory makes the movie more interesting.
No.
It kind of makes the whole movie moot. Like, why am I watching them? Like, I stopped caring a lot when those kinds of endings happen. That's why those kind of movies just never really hit me at the end. It's like, or even the idea that there's no story at all. If you have just this dream narrative with no plot, then you lose me again because I'm again wondering, why am I watching? I think even the craziest movies like The Trip. I always think of The Trip when I talk about crazy movies that like Roger Corman produced film, because it's basically, man tripping for 90 minutes, but there's a story there too. It's a loose one, but it's there.
There's something there,
and that saves the movie. And I think if you have the idea of him being a ghost, or him being, I kind of like more the idea of him being a shambling presence, like coming back from the dead for vengeance, than being per se a ghost or a dream sequence as he dies. That loses me a bit. So
what I like about Walker too is that it's bookended by the original, like, Cape Fear, Robert Mitchum playing that character in Cape Fear, and then bookended by like Michael Myers in Halloween, and like 10 years afterwards. And here, this is Walker, and I project Walker. It's like one name, but it's just a force, right? Even though he's a person and he's breathing, but he doesn't really say much. He's just an unstoppable force that you can't negotiate.
Yep, and that's why I kind of describe more to be, I would rather have him be a guy that just literally came back from the dead, as if he's a zombie or a walker. Like, I mean, when we talk about The Walking Dead now, that's the terminology they use for it. I would rather prescribe to the idea that he got shot, his heart stopped, and then he just kept going. I would rather believe that in terms of it, because he is kind of, a walking force of nature that is. And I think that's what you help when you have a like linebacker like presence like Lee Marvin in your movie, who I'm really only aware of from The Killers, which he also did with Angie Dickinson.
We got more to go.
And they didn't get along in that film, and so it led to them not getting along in this film, which I couldn't see on screen. But
no, Lee Marvin at this stage of his career has pretty much made a movie so he can go out fishing.
Yep.
That's how he treated it. The next component is, of course, this was based on a book called The Hunter, written by...
So it was Donald E. Westlake writing as Richard Stark.
Yes. So you got to get... It's Tony Stark's dad's name is Richard Stark. Yeah. So, and Donald Westlake, he did a lot of movies, but he used a lot of pen names. So if you want to even... There's another rabbit hole if you want to go down. We don't have enough time, but Donald Westlake, he won a bunch of awards, but he said, by what name? And he did a bunch of genres and did a lot of screenplays, adapted screenplays. And if you want to read the book, it's called, I think, The Hunter.
The Hunter, yep.
Yeah.
And it was also adapted into Payback with Mel Gibson.
Right, they remade this movie.
What's interesting is I'm still not sure, because I haven't seen Payback, but I'm not sure if it's... They said that film was more in line with the original script for this movie, because when Marvin and Borman both entered this script, they basically overhauled the movie. And made it something that was going to appeal to both of them and what their capabilities were. They said the Gibson version, it's almost like someone had, because they threw the script out the window, was what Borman had said. He said it's almost like Mel Gibson found it on the street and just made that movie.
I would say, just from my memory, and I haven't seen it for over 20 years, a little more splash of comedy, a little more ridiculous to this. And this is a little more, everybody, even though there's a little bit of comedy in this, point blank, there is grounded noir.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
I one other element that I really like, I didn't like. I'm going to talk about the thing I didn't like in this movie, and that was Keanu Wynn's Yost, the character that kind of just shows up to help out Marvin, and then he disappears again.
Right, yeah.
And Borman, who's a lot of his ideas kind of became Arthurian, like he even did Excalibur later on, but he had some very Arthurian storytelling ideas, and they said that's kind of where he said that was kind of the idea, was a character who shows up to aid our hero in his quest.
Yeah.
And I don't like that in this movie, because I think
doesn't make when did they meet, right?
Yeah. I want to know more about the placement of that character, why he keeps showing up. Again, that kind of aids the idea of it all being a dream, because he's got this Helperton man that shows up and gives him all the guidance. But I don't like the idea of someone aiding in this force of nature. He should be able to handle it on his own. He's a smart guy, he's clever, and he's strong. He should be able to handle it. I don't like that character. I don't think the performance is bad. I just really didn't like the way it was written.
And of course, the way it's edited, we don't get a backstory like how did they meet, what happened, did you rescue him out of the water, what the hell?
Yeah, he literally most of the scenes that he's involved in, it's almost like he came out of the scene and showed up, and then he gave exposition and help, and then he just drifted back away.
Right. So the weakest, and I have to agree, the weakest point of the movie is the relationship with Walker and Keon Wynn's character in the movie. It doesn't really. There's not a lot of development, like how did this start, why did it begin? Obviously, we have motivation, but even the motivation is a little bit weak as well.
Yeah, it would have been fun with all those flashbacks and moments and dreams to showcase a little bit of that time period between the betrayal and when he comes back. Because that, again, that aids the fact that he's a ghost or something returning, because we don't get that interim where he's kind of setting up shop and getting ready for this revenge streak. We missed that, and I think that would have been something that would have been fun to kind of expand out a bit too.
Still, my favorite scene is him murdering the bed. I love it.
I mean, you think if they made Lord of the Rings in the 60s, would he have played one of the
They had to shoot it twice, because once in regular motion and then the second time in slow motion, so they shot it 2 different times with the same gun. But I did like that. Yeah. As point to point out, this movie actually was considered. Got really bad ratings when it came out. It was considered one of the worst movies of the year when it came out, and slowly, with people like Martin Scorsese and a lot of other film critics, about 20 years afterwards, really enjoying the movie, it finally got elevated to one of the pop culture favorites.
Yeah, John Landis actually recorded a commentary for Trailers from Hell, which is a great. I think Joe Dante created the YouTube channel.
Yeah, he's another one of those critics.
People, and he watched this trailer and gave some real good guidance on what it gave to him as a filmmaker, and it's really kind of cool. If you get a chance, watch Trailers from Hell. They got some really cool content down there. But yeah, watching the trailer for Point Blank with John Landis was kind of fun to do, because you get to see more of that idea of what he took from the movie, and it's kind of fascinating stuff. Overall, Point Blank for me, parts of it brought me a little out, but overall I think the overall narrative I really enjoyed. There was a couple issues with the character of Yost. There was a couple issues with I wanted more in some of those jump around in time moments, and I also would have liked it if the bad guys posed a bit more of a threat, because even in I compared him to John Wick at the beginning of the episode. Even with that, Wick fails pretty hardcore throughout that series, whereas in this film Marvin never really fails. or it doesn't even seem like he comes up against a lot
or
of
never
problems.
really wins.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's almost like Raid of the Lost Ark. I mean, what the hell are you doing? I mean, eventually the end result would have happened without you being part of this, right?
Yeah, I almost wonder if the film like was affected by him at all, or if it's just, and that's kind of again like if the villains posed more of a threat, I think I would have felt something more a little bit.
Yeah.
But overall, very entertaining movie. I can see where it had influences on a lot of these filmmakers that grew up on B cinema, because at the time, now this is kind of considered more of an A cinema film. It's got like 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. Back then, this was more of a B cinema where people didn't talk about it, but like the guys who knew it, they really knew it.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's one of the inspirations for my comic book I wrote. So yeah, neo-noirs. And so like the late 60s, and especially what I like about this film, it is ultra modern. The houses, the office, it is the dresses, everything. It is so ultra 1967. It's almost like a snapshot of what 1967 is for modern.
Yeah, it was funny to see them kind of like looking, because it almost feels 67 forward, where they're like trying to anticipate what's going to be hot.
Yeah.
And they get most of it right, but it reminded me of watching that. There's a Mon Pa Kettle movie where they get a lot of like extravagant gifts. They win the lottery, I think it is, and so they buy a house that they think is modern. And it's just funny to see the comparisons between like what we viewed a few years from now being fashion wise, and this one really kind of hit it on the head, where it feels almost 70s-esque. You know?
All right. Have you seen Point Blank?
Point Blank, the 1967 Point Blank, because there's like 3 other movies called Point Blank, and then don't confuse it with Point Break either, because I know some people that have.
Yes, I've had that conversation in the bar when I'm talking Point Blank, and they're like, the Keanu Reeves movie?
Yeah.
No, that's Point Break.
I've been saying it, like, I keep accidentally saying it wrong. All week when people ask me what I'm watching, they're like, oh, you haven't seen that yet? I'm like, well, no, not that one.
Not that one.
So let us know your comments down below what you thought about Point Blank. I think the film is available right now on HBO Max. Check it out and then get back to us as well. And don't forget, while you're down there, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Check out that Patreon link down in the description where you can contribute to the show and help us pick some of the different films, like Brian Egger, one of our patrons, who gets to select films on a rotation that we'll be doing as part of our patron-selected episodes. And you can find more information down below.
We could say it now. You can't just pick movies that we already done before. So
Pretty much.
And
as long as we can find it. That's the other thing too. Is I've had a few people reach out with films that are out of print. I'm not dropping $100 for you unless you send me the copy. But yeah. So until next time, folks, you can find all my film reviews on goldfilmreviews.com. You
can find the St. Paul Filmcast anywhere where you find podcasts. You can also follow this show on Instagram and Twitter as well.
Yep. Lock up your beds, lock up your phones. Lee Marvin's coming shooting.